The NMR method of determining the 3D structure of proteins gave you the honor of the Nobel Prize.
We have to understand how molecules interact at body temperature. That is the main strength of the technique.
What is your experience of working with Chinese scholars?
China is a fantastic country for scientific research. That's what attracted us.
在瑞士的雪山和湖泊之间，一位科学家用分子的眼睛窥见了生命的奥秘。他是2002年诺贝尔化学奖得主库尔特·维特里希，一位用核磁共振技术解码蛋白质动态的破译者。他开创的技术让蛋白质在溶液中的舞步纤毫毕现。2013年，维特里希成为上海科技大学特聘教授，并创建首个核磁共振实验室。
If one looks at the effort that is made in pushing science, natural sciences and biomedical sciences here in Shanghai and generally in China, then I cannot imagine that there will not be Nobel Prizes.
从瑞士到中国，它跨越的不仅是地理的经纬，更是科学的边界。今天，这场分子世界的追踪正在上海持续更新。Professor Wittrich, welcome to Anchor Point.
Thank you.
You were awarded the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 2002 for using the method of determining the 3D structure of biological macromolecules in solution by nuclear magnetic resonance, or NMR, spectroscopy. So how did you enter that field of study in the first place?
I entered that field as a graduate student doing electron paramagnetic resonance that focuses on metal lines. And today, the results from those times are used as contrast agents in magnetic resonance imaging in the hospitals. And then I was equipped with one of the very first high magnetic field NMR instruments that enable studies of large molecules. And I focused again on the metal lines in the proteins. That got me into working with proteins.
There are millions, maybe billions of chemical elements in the world, but why did you choose a protein?
When I started with this kind of work, that was in 1967, it was known that proteins are the product of the genetic information in our bodies. And it was also believed that all actual functions are performed in the body are performed by proteins. And proteins have a very simple chemical structure. And you cannot understand how proteins can perform the wide range of functions that they do if you only know the chemical structure. You see, in the extreme, your hair is protein, and that hair has a different function from the enzymes in your stomach. And how would you understand this if you only knew that the same kind of building blocks are arranged linearly? The first important protein I studied was hemoglobin. And I studied hemoglobin because I was in sports, and oxygen uptake is a very critical issue in almost any sports that goes on for more than a minute. And so I wanted to understand how oxygen uptake could be improved. That was the main reason for me to study hemoglobin for a start. Then also it has metal ions, of course. It all fitted together with my past experience as an inorganic chemist, with my past experience in sports, and that's how I got into it.
Your way, the NMR method of determining the 3D structure of proteins, gave you the honor of the Nobel Prize. But before your innovation, the only method is what we called the crystallographic analysis method. So what was the limitation of that method?
Well, the limitation is that you have to get crystals. You have to get single crystals that diffract X-rays. And this was a very strongly limiting factor. You see, the first crystal structure was solved in around 1960. 10 years later, only 10 structures had been solved worldwide. And 20 years later, it was still less than 100. Mm-hmm. And it only started to speed up in the 1990s when recombinant protein technology made it possible to produce a lot of proteins that occur in minimal quantities in nature. Then you just produce them by genetic techniques.
So you have invented a new way, the NMR way. What difficulties have you encountered?
Because I had done things that nobody had done before. I had concentrated on my own hemoglobin. I took it out of my arm, and on another hemoprotein. And the success that I had with these proteins made me believe that the method could be used to determine structures. But the way it was is that for those two proteins, for hemoglobin and cytochrome C, crystal structures were available, and I would just add to the crystal structures. But I could not have determined the structure de novo. And so my ideas were all wrong. And this I discovered about 5 years later when I wrote the first monograph and reviewed the whole literature, and I realized it will never work. And 2 years later, we then discovered what would work.
In 1984, you have already used the NMR to depict the 3D structure of proteins, but you received skepticism and doubts from the scientific world. How did you fight those distractions?
Well, I had a very simple recipe. I left the university and went skiing. 2 years.
Really?
Yes. There was nothing to be done. They didn't believe that our paper was rejected. Already the very first paper on multidimensional NMR with Professor Ernst and myself, 2 Nobel laureates later on. So when I had finished the work on the first 2 protein structures, I really went skiing. 2 seasons, every day skiing, and I wrote the book again and wrote many papers on our work and just waited.
But those 2 years waiting must be some kind of torture.
No, but I knew we were right.
Uh-huh.
I knew those who didn't believe didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
It was very slow until they understood. You see, what happened is that the doubts were so great that we were openly challenged, determine a new structure that no one has seen before, and that someone who does crystallography would do the same. And we solved that structure very fast, even before they had crystals. Mm-hmm. And when they got crystals, the structure was the same as ours. That was 1988. So it was in 1988, it was a document in a scientific journal which says that's it. From now on, NMR is the same as crystallography.
And over the years, with your way of using NMR, you have successfully determined the structures of many proteins. But as the technology develops, there are new ways emerging for the analysis and determining of the 3D structure of proteins. And we know currently we have the cryo-electron microscopy. It has surpassed NMR in terms of resolution. But you still emphasize the importance and the significance of NMR, and also the advantage of NMR in the study of the protein structure. So what makes NMR technology so unique and so special?
Structural biology. It is a study of interactions between molecules. NMR could play an important role in this. Mm-hmm. And the closer we get to the functioning organism and study molecular interactions within the framework of the living organism, the more chances we have to get to the core of the secret of how things work. When you use the other techniques, you freeze the system because you take photographs. See, both X-ray crystallography and cryo-EM are based on the principle of taking photographs. Mm-hmm. When you work in solution at body temperature, you cannot use photographic methods because these things move very fast. See, in solution the proteins move, they move laterally, they rotate at frequencies that are about 10 to the 6 times higher than the highest you could catch a sharp image with shutter speeds that are available photographic instruments. And that's why people did not understand that we could do it. Mm. That is the main strength of the technique, because you also want to know about dynamics under living conditions and can relate those to functionality.
What is your experience of working with Chinese scholars?
Today, China is a fantastic country for scientific research. So, as we would have top conditions for pursuing research and that's what attracted us.
作为诺贝尔奖得主，如何在中国延续科学探索？我们继续来听库尔特维特里希讲述他的中国故事。
In 2013, you were grounded, the distinguished professor at the iHuman Institute here at Shanghai Tech University, and you established a research group. Your main focus of study, the G protein couple receptors, or the GPCRs. It aims to optimize drug efficiency and also reduce off-target effects. So, how is that going?
I already worked on GPCR since the 1990s with no success. It was, at the time, it was premature. And then the field started to fly around 2007, 2008, mostly by the program that Professor Ray Stevens and I managed in California. And then we came here and transferred this technology here, and with smart young people here, we enjoy a lot to continue getting more and more detailed information.
Your research group have signed cooperative agreements with pharmaceutical companies, transferring your research results into industrial products, into innovative drugs. Can you elaborate on this, what we call the dual wheel drive of basic research plus industrial application, and what is the prospect in your understanding of that model?
We do basic research, we publish, this is open, we may patent some of it and hope that maybe one day it becomes of interest for applications. But we don't devise our experiments for fast success in applications. We are curious, we want to know how it works, and very often knowing how it works bears fruit all of a sudden. Approximately 35% of all FDA-approved drugs target GPCRs. Mm-hmm. And there are more than 800 GPCRs in the human body. And so far, only maybe 30 have been targeted with drugs. Mm-hmm. And there you can see the enormous potential ahead. And we are just working on finding out how the different types of GPCRs work. And I expect that earlier or later, some of these results will contribute to yet another new drug. That's my position in there.
What is your experience of working with Chinese scholars?
Well, I first visited Shanghai in 1983. Development is absolutely fantastic and has been gaining velocity at the start of the 21st century. Mm-hmm. And today, China is a fantastic country for scientific research. So, as we would have top conditions for pursuing research, and that's what attracted us. Most of all, it's fun to know a lot of different things and to establish cross relations. And then you have the young kids, the students, who keep you going, and you learn from them.
So in this era, we have to talk about artificial intelligence. a Nobel laureate, Demis Hassabis, he made a stunning statement announcing that through AI, the DeepMind team completed 1 billion years of doctoral research time within only 1 year's time. And he was referring to the predicting of the structures of 200 million known proteins on planet Earth through AlphaFold 2. So anything you want to share with us in terms of AI's role in biology and protein study?
I prefer the expression large language models over artificial intelligence. You have to see that this only works because we have determined the structures beforehand. This would never work if the experimentally determined structures were not available. They don't make a secret of this. They know that exceedingly well. See, there are about 200,000 experimentally determined three-dimensional structures. And if there are proteins that do not resemble any of these, they are not going to predict them. That's part of the black holes in the biological systems. Of course, follow it in structural biology. It is a breakthrough to have this. It saves a lot of money in practice, in supporting experimental refinement of these structures, in protein structure determination, structural biology. I say the next step is to more reliably predict interactions, to more reliably predict where a small or large molecule would bind on a given protein, such as a GPCR, without doing the experiments. Okay, so you would have libraries of ligands, and you would have programs that would tell you which ones of 1 million ligands, maybe 200 or 300, would bind much better or more specifically to a particular site on a protein than all the rest. And then you have this smaller ensemble, the smaller library that you would then investigate in detail experimentally. Mm-hmm. You see, fitting a drug molecule onto a receptor is just one step. You then have to show that this works in live cells. You have to show that the negative effects and poisonous effects are not stronger than the hoped for healing effect of that particular drug candidate and so on. But this is what is certainly now intensively worked on with large language models to improve the prediction of interactions of proteins as receptors with drug molecules.
So what do you think is the next anchor point in proteinomics?
Dynamic molecular interactions.
What you just wrote on the pad is dynamic molecular recognition.
Yes.
Why do you believe so?
We have now studied molecular structures for 60 years plus. We know now that all that happens with our bodies depends on interactions. And if we want to further understand physiology, the way our life runs, we have to understand how the many molecules interact or recognize each other at body temperature. And recognition means that among thousands of possible interactions, they choose the specific one that will lead to the change in metabolism that will lead to the positive effects that you hope for, and so on.